Good evening, everyone. Please join me standing for the Pledge of Allegiance to be given by Pastor Paul McDill of the Invocation to be given by Pastor Paul McDill of the Community Church. Thanks for being here today.
Well, I want to say thank you to you guys and just let you know how much I appreciate your service. And I pray for you regularly as you lead our town. And so let me pray for you. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this day. And God, I thank you for these leaders today. And I pray a special prayer over them tonight. I pray that you give them hearts to serve. I pray that you give them minds to see and to think and to have great insight. And that you would give them ears to hear your voice. And that you would give them hands to serve the community around them. Your word tells us that you give us wisdom if we ask for it. And so, God, I pray that you would give them special wisdom as they make decisions for this community, and that you would continue to bless this community, and that you would use us in great ways. And I pray that in Jesus' name. Amen.
Please join me standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible. Please be seated. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Town Council meeting of Town of Sunnyvale for Monday, June 13th. For the record, we have all council members present. The time is 7:01 and we have call. We have 4 introductions tonight. That's the first item. The first one is no one other than our new town manager, Jeff Jones. On behalf of the council, let me introduce Mr. Jones. Jeff's career in public services spans over 3 decades in 5 communities across Texas and Wyoming. Jeff most recently served as the president and general manager of the Woodlands, Texas, during a time when the community was rated the best city in America, as well as one of the fastest growing cities in the United States. Before leading the Woodlands, Jeff served as deputy city manager, an assistant city manager in Mesquite, an assistant city manager in Hearst. Jeff has also worked as a budget analyst for the state of Kansas, in addition to serving the cities of Casper and Douglas, Wyoming. Jeff earned a Master of Public Administration from Texas Tech University's Center for Public Service and a Bachelor of Science from Black Hills State University. He's a graduate of the Public Executive Institute held at the University of Texas at Austin's Lyndon B. Johnson School of Public Affairs. Jeff has been a full member of the International City Management Association since 1996 and previously served as president of the Urban Management Assistant of North Texas. Jeff, at this time, on behalf of the town, let me welcome officially to the Town of Sunnyvale. We got 3 more introduction. Next one is John Downey, Paramedic, Chief.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Good evening. We've got 2 guys tonight we want to introduce to our fire family that we have, and this will bring us up to our staffing. So we are happy to have them. First one, obviously, is, as you mentioned, John Downey. He did a lot of his training at College Station, the extension of Texas A&M, where he got his EMT, paramedic, and his fire certification. He's been in the service now 3 years, a little over. He's also had come from us from Everman. And so we picked him up on our last hiring process. So I want to introduce to you John Downey. So we're glad to have him. As I said, he's firefighter, paramedic, so he's gonna learn how to do the ambulance real well now. So we're glad to have him. So go ahead and do it.
Want to introduce the second person?
I can introduce
You can
the
take
second
pictures
person.
together.
The second person is Daniel Crest. Dan, if you want to come on up here. He comes from us. He's got over 10 years of service as a paramedic. He is, we pulled him out of working for CareFlight. And so he's working for us now, and we're really glad to have him. He's got a lot of experience working on the CareFlight box and the 9/11. He's also got an associate's degree in criminal justice. And but anyway, we want to introduce him as well. We're glad to have him as well to our family. So congratulations.
Yes. You gotta hold the sign. Okay. Here's your sign.
Like a bunch of panels, like a kid.
So bad when I hold up. Okay, council, you can say there. At this time, I also want to introduce Matthew Fraley. I'm going to invite Chief Hawks to come forward.
Don't have any helmets to give away to him. But he did get his badge earlier this morning. Officer Matt Fraley has been in law enforcement for 22 years. He served at the Midland, Texas Police Department for 15 years, serving in patrol, the gang unit, narcotics, property, and lastly as a homicide detective. He served the last 7 years in the Metroplex with the Murphy and the Lavon Police Departments. Officer Fraley is a certified instructor, a master peace officer, and holds a bachelor's degree from West Texas A&M University. We're really fortunate to get someone with his caliber of training and experience. Matt and Natalie have 6 children. In his time off, Matt enjoys working out, maintaining a healthy lifestyle, and snow skiing. He started this morning. It's his first day, so please help me welcome Matt to the Sunnyvale family. Appreciate
Here's your sign. There's your sign.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a family affair.
Okay, next item on the agenda is announcements. Pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.0415, Mayor, council, and staff may report on various items. Council, do you have any announcements?
I'd like to announce that on June 24th, the town of Sunnyvale is going to have the Red, White, and Boom celebration. So it is at 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. There's going to be food, fun, and fireworks. So remember, June 24th, Red, White, and Boom. There's more information in the town newsletter that was sent out, I believe, on Saturday, and in the mailer also. But anyway, fireworks on June 24th. It's going to be a fantastic time.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Anyone else from the council? Anyone from the staff, any announcements? I'm going to close the announcement. Moving on to the public comment. This is the time members of the audience may come forward and speak to the council on any items other than personal or legal matters or items on the agenda. If you'd like to come forward and speak to the council, you may do so at this time. If you're joining us via Zoom, you may raise your hand. No one coming forward from the chamber. Anyone raising their hand?
No, sir.
So no one raising their hands. We're going to close the public comment section. Moving on to the consent agenda item, council, we have one item, item number 2. Consider action on the minutes from the May 23rd, 2022 town council meeting. Would anyone like to remove the item from the consent agenda? Okay, if not, have a motion to approve consent agenda item 2.
Motion to approve consent agenda item number 2.
Motion made by Mr. Freeman.
Second.
Second by Mr. Eldridge to approve consent agenda item number 2. All in favor signify. All opposed, motion passed 7-0. Okay, moving on to the discussion and action item portion of the agenda, item number 3. Discuss and act upon resolution 2022-09, approving the concept plans for Jobson, Barnesbridge, Samuel Farm North, and New Hope Parks. Let's see who is going to be talking that agenda. That you,
It's going to be a couple of people.
Mr. Barr, how are you, sir?
How are
Good to
you?
see
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The properties that we'll be discussing tonight were identified in the 2021 Parks Master Plan as possible sites for improved recreational opportunities. Over the course of the last year, we've had public input from the master plan project, as well as several meetings with the community, and several 4B meetings, town council meetings, things of that nature. So the plans presented tonight for approval are just intended to be a guide. They are meant to show what can happen at those properties based on some of that feedback from the public input, but they don't in any ways finalize the design or approve any type of funding for them. All of those design elements and funding would have to be taken up at a later date. So I've asked Hunter Rush from MHS Planning and Design to go through a brief presentation and answer any questions. So.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, council, staff. Thanks again for having me. I'm sure you recognize me. Been here a few times talking about your park system. We're here tonight. I'm going to run through
So would you state your name and address for the record? please?
Hunter Rush, and I'm in Tyler, Texas. With MHS, gonna present just real briefly some of the parks we've worked on. You've seen them several times. There haven't been a lot of changes. There've been minor tweaks we've made over the course few months. And as well as we've put budget numbers together for it. Hope you've all had a chance to look at those. And I did want to reiterate what Burton had said, is that it really is conceptual. This is by no means tying you to any of these specific designs or the budget numbers. These projects can be built in phases or all at one time throughout the course of the next few years. So with that being said, I'm going to run through a quick agenda with the overall town map of where these parks are located. We'll run through the 4 parks we have looked at: Jobson, Samuel Farm North, Samuel New Hope, and Barnes Bridge. And then we'll open it up for questions or comments. And again, we're asking that we adopt a resolution approving these conceptual designs. So again, this is the town map. You can see the 4 locations of the projects we looked at. Our park designs. We brought 2 conceptual designs of Jobson tonight. One, because there was a lot of discussion over the course of this project of parking and where parking should go. One of the items we did do is we extended the parking on the south side, so that parking lot is much larger than it was originally on this site plan specifically. As we move to our second option, you can barely see there's a change up on Taverner Lane, that we've added some parking up on the north side of that road that would go into the park. It would actually be constructed into the park lane, not just be striping along the road. Again, these are just conceptual options. Throughout the discussion, there was a lot of back and forth of where cars should be.
So the question for you, sir, so the difference between this plan
Yes, sir.
and the plan before is item number 13, right?
Yes, sir.
13 is on this plan, there is parking along Tavern, but on the previous version which you showed,
It is not there.
it does not have a park.
Correct.
That's the difference. Okay,
And
thank you.
it's very, I believe it's 10 spots parallel. And again, it's not just in the road. We would actually pull the curb back and move the trail to fit it in that space. So moving on to Samuel, and I should mention there, you see the dollar amounts at the bottom. The minuscule cost of that doesn't change with a scope of this size. Again, these are conceptual numbers. They are built off of 2022 dollars. So the lower range is if you built it tomorrow. The higher range is if you built it in about 3 or 4 years. It's just you can see how the price would increase. So Samuel Farm North Park, again, we've got our multipurpose fields, our pavilion. Nothing has changed on this specific drawing since we last talked. As you can see, the dollar signs at the bottom, about 5.3 to 6.2 million would be to construct that in its entirety. Samuel New Hope Park, as you can see, we did make significant changes to these. We added some trails, we added the pond, I believe the last time we spoke, and some additional parking. And we can see the dollars on that are 2.3 to 2.7. Again, 2022 numbers or 2025 numbers. And Barnes Bridge, the biggest additions we had to that was we increased some of the boat parking sizes. And then we also added a gate and perimeter fencing around it to keep it a little more secluded from the neighboring landowners. Again, you can see the price tag on that is 3.9, 4.5. So with that, I know that was very quick, and I'm happy to discuss any of those with you in more detail. But I know you have seen them several times and they have not, there's been no significant changes since the last time we spoke.
Thank you, Mr. Roach. If you don't mind, take a seat. I'm going to take some public comments. So at this time, I'm going to open up for public comments. If there's anyone from the members of the audience who would like to come forward and speak to the council, you may do so. When you come, would you mind dropping off that card? That way we can keep track of who is coming to speak. If you're joining us via Zoom, you may raise your hand. Lourdes, would you mind stating your name and address for the record, please?
Yes. Hello, Mayor and Town Council members. My name is Erica Lawless, and I'm at 365 Taverner Lane. I'm here tonight to really just kind of give you my opposition to option 2 of the Jobson Park concept plan. Option 1, I like it. I think it's a great opportunity. We attended the community events that were provided. During those option periods of input, I don't recall any parallel parking spots provided during those input and feedback. So I didn't know that that was a part of the concept plan. Another reason I would consider that you think about opposing option 2 is I don't know of any other parallel parking options in any venue or community space in the community at all, especially in front of a residential street. In our community and input that we attended, we were assured that there would be green space between the park and the houses. And so obviously having the parallel parking would not allow for that green space buffer between the park and the residents. Again, I'm asking that you just strike option 2 from the proposal, because I really feel like it limits the visibility, there's more traffic, and I think the other parking available for the park would be sufficient. And we're certainly we favor option 1. And so we're asking that you strike option 2. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Lourdes.
Uh-huh.
Anyone else would like to come forward? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Mary Kuhn. I live at 373 Taverner Lane. So I'm very familiar with parking in front of the house. And that's one of the things that we have tried to fight against with the park being across the street, because it does cause safety issues. It causes us problems getting in and out of our driveway. It's a hazard for the kids who are riding their bikes and people who are, walking their dogs, walking their babies. We think that there's sufficient land across the street for there to be plenty of parking and the ballparks and the green space. So we don't feel like those 10 spaces, we never, as Erica said, we never saw any kind of indication that they were talking about 10 parallel parking spaces on Taverner. It seems like it's a lot of money to spend to tear out that land to put 10 parking spaces when they should easily be able to accommodate those 10 parking spaces. I just wonder why they felt the need to put those parking spaces there, because we never heard anybody talk about that before. But we also oppose those 10 spaces on Taverner, or any parking for the park on Taverner. It is Jobson Park, so we think that the entry and the exit for the park should be on Jobson.
Thank you, Ms. Kuhn.
Thank you.
Anyone else would like to come forward and speak to the council from the chamber? Okay, no one else is coming forward from the chamber. Erica, anyone else? Anyone raising their hand?
No, sir.
No hands raised. With no one coming forward from the chamber and no one raising their hand, I'm going to close the public comments. Council, at this time, I'll take your comments. Do you have any questions for staff or your comments? Thanks.
Mr. Mayor, just wanted to follow up. Appreciate the plans and wondering, to answer the question, why, I'm just curious about the rationale behind adding, what am I missing about the parking? Like, why did we need it? Was there some issue that caused it? I'm just trying to look for information on that.
You can talk.
Yeah, there was, throughout the course of going back with 4B and with town council, there was just discussion about the pros and cons. We did not hear, they're correct, there was not a lot of public comment in favor of those. But it was asked for us to look into that consideration and put a dollar amount on it to be an option to look at.
So there wasn't any kind of data that drove it. It's just discussion about where to have additional parking, whether we move to the front of the park or.
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something.
Yeah,
about it.
correct. It was just an all through discussion of what is the feasibility of it, how expensive would it be, is it worth looking into? So we figured. we would provide
It's a cost consideration more than convenience. It's purely a cost question. It is a cost question.
Yeah, it would cost more to add that parking there, but
Another reason not to.
Council, do you have, when Ms. Rush is here, do you have anyone has any questions? Mr. Egan?
This might be somewhat outside the bounds of the discussion, but I think it's pertinent to the discussion. 3 of these 4 properties, the town has no real control over. How were these 4 properties, well, how were the 3 properties arrived at?
through the master planning process of needing park upgrades and updates. And
These specific properties were detailed in the master plan or just a request for additional park properties in the town?
these were specifically looked at in the master.
What master plan was that? You know the date, recall the date?
Yeah, 2021 Parks and Open Space Master Plan.
Okay. I'll save the rest of what I have for later.
Okay, are there additional questions for staff or for the consultant?
Mayor.
Hey, Chief.
Yeah, I just had a comment for the citizens, something to think about because I'm told. Inside the actual, okay. So it might actually help the citizens on that road because if they don't put those spots there, people can still legally park on that road. So then you're going to have them even closer to your house. If the park's busy, kids are just going to pull up and park there on the road, and that's legal. So that's just something to think about. It might actually help you get the cars farther away from your house if there's a place that's designed for parking. Because if they don't, I promise you, they're going to start parking on the side of the road there because they're not going to want to go around the front. So it's just something to think about.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Page?
Chief, and this may, you may or may not know this, maybe a question for the attorney, can we enact a no parking zone, like even during hours and things like that? I'm sure we can probably do that. We'd have to do that to prevent what you're saying, because we'd already talked. about that.
So I think so, Ryan. So I think when Ms. Guthrie was here, one of my neighbors asked the same question. So it goes both ways, right? So if you park it, no parking, that applies to everybody. That means if I live on the street, if a guest is visiting us, so the guest can park here. So it cuts both ways. So just kind of other perspective. Unless there's a timing we can, I don't know, we can have different timing.
That's what I was thinking. There's a
Yeah,
time,
okay.
probably time issue.
The enforcement nightmare. So, but the neighbors have brought this up in the past also. Okay, but Chief, a good perspective. Thank you for that. Are there additional questions for staff or for the consultant? I know. Okay, Mr. Clark.
Well, are we going to review all the different
So
plans? What's,
you could start from the top.
well, no, I don't have any questions. I'm just wondering if, because he only presented the first one, so I didn't know if he
I
had.
think
more
it's not
presentation. Okay.
It was quick.
Again, this is the same thing Barton has sent out several times. So this is not a new thing, right? The only change is the option 1 versus option 2. And we got some input from Mr. Lawless last time. So,
Right.
so
No questions.
cool. Thank you. So you can take a seat. Thank you. So I'm going to turn out to Mr. Jones. What are your thoughts about? And Burton talked about this is a concept plan. We are not approving budget. This is more of a vision document. We are approving a vision. and I'm sure Mr. Jones will talk about, we have a number of capital improvement projects we're working on, and money is always going to be limited. Money has to be balanced between different projects. And you will hear people saying that I want economic development. And this, a lot of people will say, then a group of residents will say, my kids, my grandkids want to play in Sunnyvale, not in Phoney or Mesquite. But anything wrong with it, so I want parks. Then you will hear a different group or subgroup of residents saying that I like marina, I like boat rides, I like fishing. Okay, that's all good. There's going to be another group of people will say, hey, wait a minute. 4B has 2 charter. The economic development is 1. Then quality of life, that's the second part of the vision of the town. So I want trails, I want parks, I want trees, all of them. So not everybody is going to agree on one concept. But again, that's where the community is diverse. Community of different age, different generations, different interests. So you're going to hear interest in every one of them. So that probably I took a lot of thing from you, but I just want to get your perspective on. And again, if you don't mind addressing the comment made by Mr. Egan, if you don't mind, if you can touch on some other place.
Well, yeah, thank you, Mayor. Very good points. And I'll just reiterate what was said at the beginning of the presentation. This is a planning process, and this really kind of closes the loop, if you will, on the planning process for your parks and open spaces, assuming that you would go forward and approve the resolution tonight. So it doesn't obligate the council to fund the projects. It doesn't obligate the council to set a time frame when to build the projects. Those steps occur later in the budget and your long-range planning, strategic planning processes. These projects, if approved tonight as concepts, along with the other planning components of the Parks Master Plan, will be included in the capital improvement process when you start to allocate resources each and every year. And so at those times, when you approve budgets that include components of the Parks Master Plan, you will be able to come back and revisit these components. Obviously, the pricing, and I think it was included in the staff report, but the pricing includes a 5% cost escalator. Let's just say if you were to pick the Barnes Bridge projects, for example, obviously that cost is going to be significantly higher 7 years from now than it would be today in the 2022 dollars. So there's a lot of factors you'll have to consider, both in terms of cost, in terms of prioritization with other capital improvements, as well as how to fund them. Some parks certainly could be neighborhood quality of life issues. Other parks could certainly be attractions which would bring people in from elsewhere and maybe enhance a project, an economic development project, for example, maybe on the lakeside property as a good example. So each one of these concepts are just that. They're concepts. This closes the loophole on your parks and open space master planning process if you choose to go forward tonight. But you will have, as they say, another bite at the apple down the road when it comes to funding, when it comes to timing. And then, of course, there'll be another revisit of the plans when it comes to pricing. So again, I would just view this as kind of closing the loop on that master planning process for your parks and open spaces.
Mr. John, would you address also the comment about these properties? 3 of them are now owned by us. I mean, City of Dallas and Mesquite, TJ, that type of thing. At the top level, I know we don't have any final answers, at least at the top level. Your thoughts?
Well, I think Councilman Egan makes a good point. Certainly, some of the properties will have more constraints when it comes to their development. So if you're going to, say, for example, take the Samuel Park North project, certainly you have 2 other public entities that are going to be involved in that process before you can actually go forward and implement and execute the plan. And those are 2 boxes that would have to be checked before you can go forward. And so while the council may approve the project conceptually, you may fund it, you may put it in your capital improvement plan and designate a fiscal year where you want that project to happen. If the other 2 taxing entities or public entities, being the City of Mesquite or the City of Dallas, don't agree to those concept plans, then obviously you'll run into a barrier that just at that time won't be overcome. So, but they are within your town limits, and so therefore you do have the ability to take a look at those in the planning process. It's very similar to a comprehensive plan. It is a plan and it is a guide for the future, and some of that may not actually come to fruition over time, but it's certainly a concept that you look at and you designate and adopt as official town policy.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. And Mr. Egan, you said later in the process. Do you have any more comments?
I think we just put lipstick on a pig. Not to go against what you said, Jeff. I truly appreciate where you're coming from. I think this council needs to be looking further ahead than trying to develop 3 properties as extensively as anywhere between, well, the total of the 4, based on the numbers we had in our agenda, is between 15 and 21 million dollars. You pull out the 4 million that I remember seeing for Jobson Park and the modifications that were going to be done to it. That leaves between 11 and 17 million dollars for the other 3 that we have very limited. And I have told this, I've suggested to this council before that if you haven't read about the Samuel properties and the opportunities that we might possibly have with being able to utilize them, you probably need to spend some time reading. That land was dedicated by Dr. Samuel with the words "not to be sold." That means no one's ever going to get it, as much as we might want to try to do it. And there have been several legal court challenges to that. People trying to do something with it, even to the extent that some of the land that was sold over in North Dallas and central part of Dallas, there were lawsuits about them even having sold it. Although Dr. Samuel did give a little bit of wiggle room or gray area to say that some of the lands could be sold to help fund the Samuel Trust. City of Dallas kind of didn't do what they were supposed to do with those monies, and the money isn't there. Now, I'm kind of strong about this. I spent the first 5 years of my working life after I got out of high school, while I was going to college, working for the Dallas Park Department. They're the ones that have the control. I spent time walking Samuel North doing tree survey back in the early 70s, and there weren't near as many of those cedar trees out there as there is today. What the town was eventually able to do on Samuel North with the walking trails, I was perfectly okay with, because it's something that that Dallas can't just all of a sudden decide they're going to come in with the bulldozer and scrape it off. They're probably not. And if they did, we didn't lose a whole lot. But our cost benefit that we got for being able to put in those sidewalks, I'm all for. I'm all for extending what we've had done at Samuel North Park. I'm all for doing similar to Samuel New Hope. But I think once you start going in and putting amphitheaters and venues such as that into that property, we're standing at risk for a pretty significant amount of money. Thirdly, when it comes to Barnes Bridge, people could say I'm partial to Barnes Bridge because I live on Barnes Bridge. I've lived there 42 years. I've seen what goes on at the Barnes Bridge Park. And if any of you have ever been in a boat and gone around on Lake Ray Hubbard and tried to land at Barnes Bridge Park, it is so shallow, 60 and 70 feet away from the actual land that you can walk up onto, that the amount of dredging that's going to have to be done to make any kind of a boat dock over there is going to be horrendously expensive. And maybe that was figured into what the designs were. But to put a fence around it and try to keep things kind of safe, I don't think it's going to work, because it didn't work in the past when a lot of nefarious things went on down at that end of the street. Not to mention the fact that residents of Sunnyvale are not going to get to use it. Because guess what's going in just a little bit to the north? Fireside. The Garland development. 1,400 rooftops is the last number I remember hearing. Guess who's going to get to use it? Oh yeah, by the way, Garland at one time had a boat ramp on wind joists that tied into that same branch of Lake Ray Hubbard, actually further further to the north, on the other side of 30. They took it out. Probably because the lake stayed too low for too many years and you couldn't easily dock your boat in there. I used to dock our boat in there, or not dock, but launch our boat in there quite often, but they took that out. Then when you go a little bit to the south of there and you go to Rowlett Road, as Rowlett Road crosses over that branch of Lake Ray Hubbard, there used to be a marina there on the north side or the west side, whichever way you kind of want to look at it, of Rowlett Road. There used to be a marina there and it was there for 25 or 30 years. It's been gone for about 15 years. It's actually in the lake for all intents and purposes. It ties onto the land. It's closed now. It's kind of a fishing area that people go to. I'm not sure who really owns it because it's in the lake and the city of Dallas owns 40 feet above the take line of the natural water level, which I think is 450 feet, 58 feet above sea level. But then you go across the street of Rowlett Road. And there's another park, a whole lot like the park at the end of Barnes Bridge. And it's been chained and gated off for, I know, the past couple of years. Why do you think they did that? Why do you think they closed the Windjoyce Park? Can't answer the question about the private enterprise that owned the marina type thing. Maybe they just didn't have the financial wherewithal to keep going. But let me tell you, I think we have a responsibility to be looking outside the box of these 4 properties just because they exist. And Jobson property, let me exclude and all what I'm talking about. Jobson Park, I've been a part of what we've done to try to make that park larger. I know that the neighboring residents are going to have some issues with it, and I don't blame them. And I would have felt like there should be a good greenway buffer, as was discussed, and I think is acceptable. But I sure don't want people, lining the streets and parking along the streetway. And if the fields are in the right place, relevant, and the parking lots are large enough off of Jobson, I would hope that there wouldn't be a whole lot of street parking that goes on over there, because people are going to take the shortest path to get to the field that their kids playing on. Not, oh yeah, there's 42 other spaces over there, but I've got to walk, 500 yards to get to where my kid's playing. They're going to take the shortest path. That's just the natural way people are. So I think that this council needs to take a step back. Maybe we table the plan and the idea. Maybe it could be applicable to other areas in this town where we can go get some land that we have true control over. And we can do the things that we want to do, the things that the residents want. Have more vision about it rather than just, I'm not so sure, and I'm sorry I didn't go to any of the public meetings and hearings that happened. I try to stay away from those because I talk with people. But I don't know, it's real easy to draw all these things up on a big board and say, this is in our master plan, and this is in our master plan, and this is in our master plan. It's really easy to put those things up on a board and say, what would you like to have here? Well, sure, I want soccer fields, and I want ball fields, and I want swimming pool, and I want a boat ramp. Without the underlying issues of being able to utilize those pieces of property to do those things, which in this case, we don't own it. And we have little, if any, control over it. So if I were going to vote on this tonight, a concept plan, and this is where my lipstick on a pig kind of comes from. I know how these things work. At least it's how they worked in my almost 20 years of being involved with this stuff. And once that concept plan goes into the books, the next step is, well, the concept plan sets that council agreed to says we're going to do this. So it starts rolling and snowballing, and the next thing you know, we're doing it. I think that we need to step back, shelve it, and put together a real plan for a park system in the town. Part of this, I think, was also driven by the fact that as we put this together, we were somewhat in the midst of buying the railroad tracks. And now we have that. And I would love to see adjacent parks to the railroad right of way that we just now bought. We should be looking at trying to figure out a way to spend part of that $15 to $21 million to buy land adjacent to the railroad right of way. And be more visionary about what it is that we're doing. And with that, I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Egan. Are there additional discussions or questions or comments on this? Mr. Freeman?
Mr. Jones, I have a question for you. Being that those properties that Councilmember Egan discussed are, controlled by other parties, would there be possible additional funding from those other parties that could go into creating such a park, or would it be 100% on our dime? Being that especially, some of those come very close to those towns, and they would have access to them just as much as we would, regardless of whether they're in our town limits or not.
It's a good question, Councilman Freeman. So hypothetically, certainly because it is a city of Dallas asset, if they were to mutually agree with the town of Sunnyvale for improvements on that property, for example, at Sammy North, certainly they could contribute financially to those projects as well. And again, that's hypothetical. First, they would have to agree. Secondly, I'm sure you would probably have to have some sort of long-term agreement between the two entities before any construction occurs. And then there's ownership and maintenance issues that have to be hammered out in some sort of an agreement. But along with that, certainly there's the possibility that another entity, given that it's their property, it's their asset, could certainly contribute. There's, to Councilman Egan's point too, there's also the possibility that they could say, we don't want anything done in the park as it is. So those would be discussions to be had with other public entities. But yes, that's certainly a possibility.
Thank you. The only other thing that I would add to this is that where things sit currently, we can't afford to do any of the four. So, talking about come up with a better plan for better parks that we could actually spend some of that money on. That money is as hypothetical as anything else we've discussed because that money doesn't exist right now. So, I completely agree with where you're coming from on that point, but at the end of the day, it's not as if we have $20 million sitting around for parks.
Council additional discussion, Mr. Clark?
Now, I think some of the purpose of these plans of making this vision was also just kind of to lay claim to it, right? So we don't lose control of it. About the park at Lake Ray Hubbard at the end of Barnes Bridge, part of it was, I think we had to come up with a plan because we've been waiting for so long. So part of it is like, we have a plan now, funding, how long will it be before we can get the money to do something there? How will it look? I think those are all questions up in the air. But part of it, I think the plan is important to make sure that we can have a vision to move forward and try to maintain control of those. So I'm definitely in favor of this plan. It is a vision, it's a plan, and it gives us something to focus on. I think we have more immediate needs, such as our roads and whatnot. So I don't see any of this getting built out immediately, but I think it's good to have this vision.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Anyone else? Mr. Allen?
Mayor, just real quickly, I understand a conversation with Burton that we can pick and choose concept, assuming that it were to pass tonight. We can pick and choose a item or two items down the road. Nothing has to be built in the entirety. We can pick the softball field at Jobson, and we can build that standalone. All right, Burton, we can pick any individual piece as monies are available. And we can go from there.
So, Mr. Allen, if I could, I agree with you, right? So we can pick all four if we choose to, right? We don't need to build anything this year, next year, 5 year, 10 year from now. To your point, that we don't have rights over certain things. Unless we get the other entities to approve it, it's a no start. You're not going to go spend the money, then go get the approval. So we can, if the council chooses to approve it, right? this became part of the thing about the CIP plan we have. We have 35 items on it. And we prioritized it. And we put the fire station number one, and then there are several items on the list we got to go work on. So this, if the council approved, this became part of the big vision, big plan. That's the infrastructure plan. There is parks and recreation plan, the sports plan. At the end of the day, we don't have no money. We don't have money. We don't have it.
You know, and I would,
If we
no, I,
find the money, it's a no-go.
no, I agree. And my question was that we could do one or none. The Jobson part, I think this council made a purpose effort to purchase that land from the school, not to sit there and mow, but to do something with it, even if it's a small portion of something. I think, talk about irresponsibility. I think it's irresponsible. So we're going to buy this land from the school and let it sit there and never mow it. That's another topic. I just want to be sure we could pull some piece out of that if we wanted to tie into, I think what Mark was saying on the Samuel North, if we were briefed correctly, Jeff, from previous town manager, is we had an obligation to do some progressive development and at some point, some progressive build, or then we could fall into a lame duck where we're doing nothing and somebody can step in and say, hey, they're doing nothing with that land. I don't want to hold your feet to the fire, but I think that was some piece of the planning process that we planned it. We do it when we can. And I'm not advocating for anything or against anything specifically. I just want to clarify that point. But more importantly, was that we can pick and choose any one item that we want to as money and time becomes available. And thank you, Bert. That was only my question.
Good point. Any other comments?
Mayor, if I may, I
Mr. Jones?
just want to clarify on the resolution that's in your packet. Does reference the recitals that includes all 4 of the park plans. So as the resolution is developed, certainly if you want to amend that, and I'll maybe refer this to our council, but you would need to probably modify the resolution if you're going to do anything other than adopt the 4 concept plans.
Council, I'll give you my thoughts, right? So I like vision. When we start talking about strategy and vision, we threw a lot of things in the strategic vision, right? We have the strategy and the vision. We look at different perspective. We look at business incubation. We talk about research and development. We talk about collaborating with the school. We talk about small town feel, small community, economic development, and we even we're talking about development along Highway 80, even though that's not something we are going to spend money this year, next year. Then we will talk about properties along Lupton properties we don't own. And we talk about downtown vision, which probably all of us know won't happen in the next year. It's a 20-year vision. Again, this is all part of the vision. The element we often forget is the baseball field, softball field. Used to be, at least at one point of time, younger parents used to come and ask, hey, we need our kids to place to play. We don't want to go to Pony. So I like vision. I like including, my opinion, all of it in a vision. Not saying that we should get any of them done or every component of it done. So if you look at the New Hope, there are just a bunch of items. I don't even know I support any or most of it. But there are components of it support. But again, we don't have money at any of them at this time. Again, I don't think this is something, this is me saying at least, council alone wants to go take the funding we have on sales tax and go implement it. I think these are things we need to go and put in front of the citizens. This is not a necessity. This is a benefit. This is a quality of life. I think we got to put this in front of citizens when the time comes. No. And ask their opinion. Do you want to approve a general obligation type of thing? And the citizen wants it, citizen gets it, and they're willing to pay for it. If not, it's a vision. So my thought here is, I don't think we should kill any concept early. Otherwise, we just don't know the potential, right? We just don't know it. And again, not advocating for any specific items on this one. I don't like parking in front of the And I can say that right now. I don't like the jobs and parking. I can't. Again, Chief, I fully respect your position. And again, there's something called skate park. I'm not a big fan of skate park in anywhere, but maybe somebody in the council like it. You can remember though, every council has a shelf life, right? This could be the next year after the council turns. So people can come and make this. So I think Berkeley is asking here is staff. Do you agree with the vision? If you agree with the vision, vote for it. Not say you got to approve any projects, spend any money on any of them. Are you good with including these 4 projects in a long-term vision? When this will be implemented, 2022, 23, 25, 50, we don't know. We got to figure that out. So I am in favor of all 4, including them in the plan. Not advocating for one or the other to be spent money right now. That's going to come back to the budget cycle. So that's my thought. Additional comments or questions or discussions?
Mayor, go ahead, Mark.
Mr. Egan?
I'm sorry. All I want to do is say that if I didn't make it clear in my little dissertation, I'm all for parks. I'm all for those things that are quality of life related and oriented. I don't have a problem with the Jobson Park vision. I think the rest of the visions are inappropriately or improperly visualized. I think that before we got to this point, we should have been better positioned to what we could do. I agree with Kevin's comment that there's some aspects of these that might be needed to be done in order to prove that we are looking to do something. That doesn't mean I have to vote for it. I think that, again, we need to shift our vision to what could really happen rather than waste our time on what might not happen because it's out of our control. To me, that's a longer ranged vision, maybe not necessarily in time, but in how big the umbrella is. And I think that's what's important. Again, I want more to happen in this town related to parks. I just don't know that this is the right set, other than Jobson, to be even looking at it from a conceptual perspective.
So, Mr. Egan, I'm not countering. I respect everything you said. Just to give you draw some parallels, right? We spend money on downtown development, and we don't own any of the downtown property, but we still had a team. We had citizens input. We had a consultant, and we know this is not going to happen in 1 year, 2 years. It's going to be 20 years from now. Then we
Mayor, excuse me for a minute. When it comes to the downtown vision, I have said all along and told the committee that was elected by this council, you guys have a blank piece of paper to work with. Forget the downtown overlay. You have a blank piece of paper to work with. Open your mind up and let's see what we can really put together for a downtown vision. But instead, we continue to focus on this general little area right here. Not necessarily against that, but did we really think outside the box? That downtown overlay concept and thought was put together 10 or 15 years ago. Things have changed in 10 or 15 years. This town isn't what it was 10 or 15 years ago. We have ample opportunity to try to put something together. I've thrown out some ideas, and as recently as our last meeting, about the Grandscape area up at 121 and the tollway. There was another area that's slipping my mind right now, but there was another area that I talked about. And we're not going to put something that grandiose in Sunnyvale as what the Grandscape area is, but it's something that this town could really prosper with in such a small area that we have to do it in. If we would just start thinking a little more outside the box. I'm not saying all of us up here don't think outside the box. I'm just saying that this is one of those issues that I'm seeing some limited focus are narrow focus, not necessarily to anybody's fault. It's just the snowball started rolling and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And the next thing you know, we end up right here where we are right now. I think that we need to have a broader ability, a greater ability to broaden our focus. And as I said a minute ago, concept plans become the next step, which is the next step, which is the next step. And you're right, it might not happen for 5 years. But once that thing's approved, that's the guideline that pushes staff, gives staff a path to follow, to tell them where to go next. And if we approve this wholeheartedly here tonight, that's the path that's going to be taken, not to their discredit, because that's what we have told them to do. I think that, and that's why I say table it or shelve it. It doesn't go poof once tonight's over. We still have documentation. I don't think they have. We have paid for a plan. We've paid for a concept. It doesn't just vanish because we turn this down. We still have paid for it. It still exists. It's still a book or something. It's on a computer or wherever it may be. It still exists. But we could take those same concepts and overlay them onto a different piece of property that we've got control over. So I'm sorry, Mike, you were trying to make a point, but I wanted to make a point that the downtown vision, using that as an example relative to this, I think is not the appropriate parallel. Because the downtown thing is done with commercial retail monies. We're talking putting together, at least on these 3 properties, something that is not a revenue generator and is something that literally comes out of the pockets of the taxpayer. So I think trying to parallel those is not quite the way to go.
Mr. Allen?
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to address Ms. Lawless and Ms. Coon's comments. I think it's something we need to continue to look at. Nothing's going to be built tonight, no matter what's approved. But I heard your comments, and I think that this still needs to be addressed. Parking on the street in the parking spots. I'm not saying I'm in favor for it, but I heard your comments. I appreciate you coming out tonight.
Okay. Any other discussions or comments? Mr. Finch, you could say something or no? Okay. All right. Then, if no other comments, I call for a motion resolution number 2022-19.
Mayor, make a motion that we approve resolution 22-089 as presented.
Motion made by Mr. Finch to approve resolution number 2022-19 as presented.
Second.
Second by Mr. Clark. Everyone heard the motion. Are there additional discussions? If none, all in favor signify. All opposed? Voting in favor, Mr. Finch, Mr. Allen, Mr. Clark, Mr. Freeman, Mr. Eldridge, and Mr. George, and voting against Ms. Regan. Moving on to the, that's it, right? Okay, I'm sorry, no. Item number 4, update related to the lead action for water quality required by TCEQ. Mr. Brian, how are you? Thanks, guys, for today. Brian, good evening, sir.
Mayor and council. Last meeting, you'll ask for an update for the lead and copper action plan we're in. So I'll just back up and give you a real brief synopsis of how we got here. So every year we have to pull lead and copper samples. Can you hear me? It's kind of echoey, so I'm kind of freaked out. Yeah, it's really, really echoey down there. We good? Oh, okay. All right, so every water system has to pull these. It's a federal mandate. So every year we pull about 20 water samples in the fall. And last fall, I pulled 20, like I always do every year, from almost the identical sample size we pull. Only had, I think, 28 sample sites to pick from every year, and I picked 20 out of them, and we submit those. We had a protocol issue with what I thought was 8 of them. It had nothing to do with the sampling. It had nothing to do with the sample results. They hadn't even came back yet. It had to do with the protocols of taking the samples. I noted it, caught it before we even got the results back from the lab. Now, because it's a federal program, though, there was all these hoops to jump through to try to get those protocols changed or invalidated and brought back. So we had to enter what we call an action program. So that's what makes it so difficult when they say, what's the violation? Well, there's no violation except for we didn't like how the samples were pulled to begin with, and to get out of it and restart it, I have to pull 158 samples. So that 158 samples is spread over what they call an action plan of almost a year. I can get out of that a little bit earlier, and I'll explain how. So immediately we went out and we pulled our own samples throughout the community to demonstrate what we already knew, because we pulled them every year, that our levels are extremely low. They're either below the detection limit of our testing or somewhere in the neighborhood of half a part per billion, which is naturally occurring. So I pulled those, we submitted those, they came out exactly like we expected. We waited 2 months. I pulled 40 additional ones, and as well as another 10 water quality samples. They all came back either non-detected or somewhere in the range of a half a part per billion, which is 1,000 times below any action levels.
So within acceptable limits, basically.
Yeah, so I've got one more sample set I have to pull. I have to wait till after July 1st to pull it. It'll be another 40 of the lead and copper throughout the communities. And then I have a few water quality samples I got to pull as well. And then after that, I'm asked for a succession to the program, and we'll go back to pulling the 20, which ironically we in August, right after I pull the 40. So we'll actually have to pull 60 within the next few weeks, but that'll put us right back on track of where we always have been. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, so Brian, it makes sense to me. I'll let you give me my thoughts. Again, we did what we are required to do. And when there was concerns for the requirement, we notified the citizen. We did what is right. Transparency is important.
Correct.
And there are questions, and you and Bob and other staff members quickly and timely responded to those concerns and did what you need to do.
Yes, sir.
Everything good. So now we are on the tail end of it. Is our plan to communicate with the citizens that
Yeah,
that phase is over?
Yes, sir.
Can you comment on that?
Yes, sir. So what I wanted to do is get beyond the July samples and be in succession of the program before I told the citizens that we're now out of the program. We're back on track of normal. That the original documentation we had to send out was federally mandated. We weren't allowed to change the language. So it puts a lot of scary stuff in it. We actually had sent that out before some years ago when Sunnyvale didn't sample at all back in 2014. And we got past that one. So we'll get past this one. But the protocols weren't followed well, and we've made changes to correct that. What happened was we kept old sample bottles around, and we shouldn't have done that, and they got utilized. And
So do we have a process change? Not
we
just
don't do
doing
that
it,
anymore. So
but to non-procedure.
at the sample time we pull them, any extra sample bottles are purged at the end of the sample process.
Is that return on procedure or something?
That was not the original procedure. The original procedure, they were just kept on the shelf and used for whatever.
Is it going to be documented procedure going forward?
Yes, sir. So yes, sir. We follow the chain of custodies now a lot more precisely, and I have a better handle.
Ryan gets that, right? Okay. The council, any question for Brian? Brian, I'm just going to open up a public comment, sir. If there's anyone from the members of the audience would like to come forward and talk to the council on item number 4, you may do so. If you're joining us via Zoom, you may raise your hand. No one coming forward from the chamber. Eric, can you raise their hand?
No, sir.
No hands raised. We're going to close the public comments. Brian, I'm assuming this is more of a report. No action is required, right?
Correct, sir.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time. Moving on to the last item on the agenda, that's the mayor and council request for future staff updates and agenda items. Council.
Mayor,
Mr. Adams,
let's hit the button first.
what?
I hit the button first. Can we get an update on Trip Road? Like Eldridge is going to be hitting the punch.
Yeah, I think that request has gone to Mr. Jones, I'm sure, and Mr. Lyle and Mr. Jones will be add an email or status some update from. Do we have an update at this time, or you want to get back with us, Mr. Jones? What is your preference? Let me ask
Mayor,
you,
Mayor, I
Charles,
certainly
let
was
me ask
planning
you,
on.
Hey, Charles, can we ask for an update in this meeting, or this is more of an agenda item?
You can ask for an update, obviously, to be delivered later. Insofar as it's just a factual report, that could also be given without discussion.
Today.
Mayor, I didn't want to
No
put,
discussion.
I didn't want to put anybody on the spot. I just would like to get feedback because we're obviously all getting emails and calls. We're getting a lot
We're all
about that.
getting feedback. So Mr. Jones, then just send us an email, the status, that'd be okay? That's everybody,
That'd be great.
that we can avoid the discussions. Are we okay? Charles, okay. Council other additional agenda items. Okay, if none, can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion made by Mr. Freeman, second by Alan to adjourn. All in favor signify. Mr. Finn, you're not voting for adjourning? All opposed, motion passed 7-0. Time is 8:11, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones.